Today, we're going to look at something called positive dyadic coping. And I've noticed very many people haven't heard the term dyadic coping. So hopefully you'll learn a little bit. And for anybody who hasn't joined these sessions before, I will talk for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion at the end. I'm just going to set the scene a little bit and start with a very, very sad statistic about ADHD in families and raising what I call spirited children. The research indicates that neurodiverse families are at least twice more likely to have some sort of separation or divorce in the family than a neurotypical family. And this also increases if any parent has ADHD. Again, it doubles. And in some instances, it can be up to 60% of those who are ADHD cannot sustain a relationship for a number of reasons. If one of the children have ASD or autism, it can increase to 80%. So it's a really, really, really sad statistic. And that's why I think this particular session is really important. What we're going to look at today is the impact of parenting and ADHD-related stresses, and also look at this concept of dyadic coping, what it is, and then move on to what positive dyadic coping is and using those tools for influencing positive outcomes in your family. There's this wonderful quote, and it's not related to any neurodivergent families. It is simply in regards to parenting. And that is that even though they're a great source of joy, children and related parenting tasks are among the greatest sources of stress for couples and the most common source of conflict in parents, and among the most frequent reasons for seeking couple therapy. If you add ADHD into the mix, and this is research findings from 22 published and unpublished studies, suggesting that parents of children with ADHD experience more parenting stress than parents of non-clinical controls. It's very, very hard to quantify, but it's suggested that parents of children with ADHD are 2 to 3 times more stressed than a neurotypical parent. And I came across this study. It was only a recent study from 2022. It was a qualitative study. And what that means is it's more about the lived experience of the parents and the families. So they go and talk and understand really what it's like for them. And they come up with several themes. And these themes, and if you've got children yourself who have ADHD, you might recognize some of these traits. I most certainly do. And the theme one was the child's behavior feels like it's a wrecking ball. Uncontrollable, absent-minded, child self-loathing, which all are very, very worrying. And just the coping with the war at home and always on a state of hypervigilance and resilience through the stress. A divided family, relationships don't survive. And this has an impact on siblings and impact on the partners and impact on the child. And the constant craving for support. And one parent said it's just goddamn hard work. And with that comes social stigma and unmet needs. I've kind of painted quite a bleak picture, but I'm sure many of you may recognize this. So let me introduce you to dyadic coping. Dyadic coping broadly means helping each other as a couple, either by working together, supporting each other, taking over tasks. But it can also mean not helping effectively. So dyadic coping can be a positive experience, and it also can be a negative experience. And if you look at some of the academic literature, there are 4 aspects of dyadic coping. The common one is where both partners are affected by stress, but jointly problem solve and offer each other emotional and practical support. Then there's also positive supportive, where one partner supports the other partner who may be experiencing more stress at that time. And again, that's practical and emotional support. Then there's the delegated dyadic coping, where one partner recognizes the impact of stress on another partner and starts taking over the tasks. So let's say one person tends to always do the cooking and possibly the ironing or something, and the other parent steps in and say, you know what, I'll cook tonight or for the rest of this week, and I'll do all of the ironing, or not just do the ironing at all. So then the final one is negative dyadic coping, which essentially means really unhelpful or critical assistance. They may be resentful, indifferent, superficial, or hostile in manner. And what that might mean is they end up criticizing. So, this is your fault. You're not giving enough discipline. You're not organized. You should have done this. You should have done that. So it's that constant attack and misalignment with what each other are doing. And this can be both ways or just one way. So just delving into a few of the impacts of a negative dyadic coping. It can lead to lower life satisfaction, higher levels of anxiety and stress, increased stress and insecurity, anxiety within the child. The child might not feel psychologically safe. It may impact their well-being or healthy development. They might become disconnected or demand avoidance. So you might ask them to do something and they just refuse. But the positive dyadic coping benefits are huge. And that can induce higher life satisfaction, much lower levels of anxiety and depression, quicker stress recovery, better relationships, higher relationship satisfaction, and it can actually buffer the negative impact of chronic stress. And all hope isn't lost. So if you find you are in a relationship, or at times, because it doesn't always have to be all of the time, where one partner is not being very supportive and perhaps is being a little bit critical, you can make it better by changing the parameters and introducing some positive dyadic coping. And just before we get on to what that is, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Zena Hicks. I have 2 boys who have ADHD and coexisting conditions, so dyslexia, autism, oppositional defiance disorder, and pathological demand avoidance. But I'm also a positive psychologist, and I discovered that there was a correlation between positivity in myself and my children. So we can't fix ADHD. Whether you've got ADHD yourself or you're caring for someone with ADHD, there's so many different complicated layers in there. But the one consistent thing seems to be positive psychology, a positive mindset, positive reinforcement, etc. And for those who don't know what positive psychology looks at what is right with people rather than what's wrong. And if you joined me before, you might be familiar with the theory that by the time a child reaches 10 years of age, and if they've got ADHD, they would have received 20,000 negative comments. And that's only at school, negative or corrected comments. And that could be, sit in your seat, you're late again, you haven't done this, please concentrate, can you look at the board, can you stop doing this, and that's only at school. So if you think of all these layers of negativity coming at them, the impact of some positivity being in their environment, whether it's been at home, it's at school, or with positive reinforcement, the impact is huge. So that's why I'm a huge advocate for positive psychology. And it doesn't mean that you have to go around kind of glowing and full of energy and I'm happy all of the time, because sometimes that's not reality. But there are tools and techniques that you can use to encourage that kind of energy in and outside your household. I'm also aware that there are very many different family dynamics. So it's not always the case that we've only got 2 parents living in a house with the child, especially given the high rate of separation. In these cases where you are maybe co-parenting or have a different family dynamic, the message is, where is your support coming from? So if you don't have that supportive partner to try dyadic coping with, where is your support coming from? And I'm going to go through various different ways that we can help you with that and things you could consider. And this is something we're going to look at today, and these core areas in positive psychology. And the first of which is looking at gratitude. And we often forget about gratitude in our lives every day, especially when things aren't going so well for us. The second item we're going to talk about today is self compassion and strengths. And we're then also going to look at positive communication. And each of these aspects can coincide with any family dynamic. So, looking at gratitude and empathy, there's research that suggests that the ratio of positive to negative parent interactions is incredibly powerful at predicting child outcomes. So, you can almost predict how a child is going to respond or react or grow up, depending on the amount of negative and positive interactions within the household or at school or within their peer group. Looking at what we can do to encourage more gratitude in our lives. And this is not rocket science. It's a fairly simple strategy. You will all probably know it. And that is looking at what you are grateful for. What three things can you be grateful for? And this is one of the stable positive psychology tools of gratitude, because the more you focus on things you're grateful for, the more you will find things to be grateful for. And something what's called the reticular activating system in our brains, which basically delivers us what we want to see. So it's enforcing our perceptions. So if we perceive someone to be not very nice or disruptive or problematic, it can be often with our own children. And we will see that pattern of behavior much more regularly than we might see another behavior because we're looking out for it. So, what is in our field of perspective? If we can look at introducing gratitude, we are then looking for things to be grateful for. We're looking for the good. And by looking for the good, we can start seeing more good. So that's kind of the concept around it. So I'd always advise anybody to have a practice of gratitude, either in the morning, in the evening, or both. And it's something you can also do with your children. So it's not necessarily let's sit down and decide what we're grateful for. But when your child is going on and on and on, all the negatives, everything's bad, everything's horrible, and then encouraging them to find something that they like. What do you like? Well, I like this. Cool, that's great. Why do you like that? And then move on to this more positive perspective. Then the second thing is looking at self-compassion and strengths. Because with positive dyadic coping, when it works really, really well. But when we have children with ADHD, a lot of blame and shame comes into that narrative. So it's, what have I done wrong? What did I do? Did I cause this? I can't do enough for them. I can't fix them. I know this argument I've just had is it going to damage them? So all of that narrative that we have is obviously not looking for the good, but it's also quite debilitating on us, and it can start removing our own self-value and worth. So exercising things like self-compassion, and that is about accepting the situation we're in right now and trying to look for the support of people who do like you and possibly like you maybe a little bit more than you like yourself. Who is appreciating you? So if your child is constantly telling you how awful everything is, and you're doing such nice things for them and they're still saying how horrible you are, then you're not getting the appreciation there. And then maybe you're with a partner that doesn't respect you, or there's some pattern going on there, and you're not being appreciated by them. So then you're also then with the blame, the shame, and all of that, you're not appreciating yourself either. And that can, after a while, be quite damaging. It's really important to find the people that will bring you up, that will appreciate you, that will remind you of your value and how amazing you are. And then you can start to appreciate yourself. And one way of starting to do that is by identifying your strengths. What are you good at? And, this is an exercise you could write down. What are you really good at? And, forget parenting for a minute. What else are you good at? If you think of how you are when you're at the height in either in, your work environment or in a friendship environment or with other families or siblings, what makes you amazing? Are you very, very kind? Are you very, very generous? Are you very, very funny? And look at those strengths and try and ask yourself, well, what is about that is so special? Well, anytime I tell a joke or say things, people find it really funny and that lifts them up. It makes me feel good. It makes them feel good. And if you're struggling to find something that you think you're good at, ask other people, what do others say you're really good at? And this can be a really very insightful exercise, understanding what other people see in you. And try and appreciate this, try and accept it. This is the self-compassion rather than bash it back saying, oh no, I'm not really, I'm so bad at this. Accept it, go, okay. And just sit with that for a minute and see, that feels good. And why does it feel good? And where is this missing in different areas in my life? So what could you do to appreciate that quality in you? And then look at when you're using your strengths and what way you're using your strengths. And then observe if you're not using your strengths. So are you using your strengths within the family household? Are you using those strengths with your child? So if you are quite funny, but you're really stressed at home and you're kind of irritated and annoyed or quiet, try the humor, bring it in, try and kind of build that strength up and just play with it and see where that takes you. And the final part of this positive psychology approach is positive communication. And we all know, again, how important communication is, especially when interacting, maybe even in co-parenting, where you're in a different environment and possibly an uncomfortable one. Just trying to emphasize being as respectful and having constructive dialogue and fostering a positive environment, particularly for the children. So whether you're communicating within the home environment in front of the child or children, watching that conversation and what's being said and how it's being said. And if you are struggling with that, and we all struggle at the best of times with people, especially if you've been with someone for a long time, and there's moments where you're going, what am I doing? This, me. Well, I spend all this time and energy and years of my life. Have I made a mistake? It's a lovely exercise, again, which we call positive influencing. And again, it's another writing down event. And actually, I wrote a book last year called 28 Days Positivity, and this features in the book. And it's actually used in a work context when you have someone that you have to work closely with and you don't really like them very much and you're really struggling to kind of see them anyway differently. Remember we were saying earlier on about gratitude. If we see good things, if we try and look for good things, we can find more good things to observe. This one you would write down before you see your partner, if you want to have a good conversation with your partner, if you're really struggling to kind of find a way of communicating. Write down all of their great qualities, all the things that you like about them. And if you're really struggling, there will be something. There'll be a connection that they have with the child or something. But write down as many great things as possible about that person. Because then when you go into a conversation with that person, be it your partner or somebody else, it is about looking at the good qualities. So you're coming into the room with a much different air about you rather than weighing down with all the things you don't like about them. It just lifts that weight off and hopefully you're able to engage in a positive conversation. So these are just a few strategies that you can explore maybe over the Easter holidays. And I love this quote, don't worry that children never listen to you, worry that they're always watching you. I really like this because we do sometimes forget that. We get so involved in what we're doing that we don't realize that we are often a mirror for our children. So what can we do? What practices can we use to try and encourage them to do the same? Next week, we will look at managing moods with mindfulness. And mindfulness has quite a few different connotations around. Some people really like it and other people think so it doesn't work. But there's a lot of ways you can use mindfulness, and it's not always about just sitting down and zenning out with no thoughts and meditating. There's lots of ways to use mindfulness to get into a place where you can be calm with a child that is having a complete meltdown in front of you, or be calm with a partner, or be able to create a space that you're present in to make positive dyadic coping much easier to do. So I hope you'll be able to join me on that. And just before we go over to some questions, I want to introduce you to an initiative I'm just launching, which is a membership for parents. And I've been doing one-to-ones with lots of people for many, many years. And I noticed that actually the one-to-ones are great. Psychoeducation is fantastic. The knowledge is great. But community is often missing with parents of children with ADHD. And that is knowing that you're not alone, being able to talk about these issues that you think that are unique to you. So I've created this space for people to join and learn, like we're doing on these Wednesday sessions, but also then talk to one another through community chat. And I'll be creating 2 clinics each week. So you can drop in and just ask for advice or deconstruct something that's either happened at the weekend or just before you go into the weekend. And obviously then lots of different resources. If you're interested in that, by all means, just get in touch with me. You can also see more information on my website, which is positiveadhd.co.uk. I'm going to hand it over to questions and stop my screen share.